Hey guys, today we're going to talk about something a bit different. I'm going to talk about what needs to be done to the car to get it finished, and I'm going to go step by step through some of those things. The first part of the project that I need to continue on with is the front pushrod suspension. So you can see here on the actual driver's side, I've got the suspension's pretty much been made up. It's got all the mountings in place. Basically everything is done except the bell crank itself, which is just a 3D print at the moment. So eventually that will get machined from aluminium. But if you look on the other side, I haven't started that side. So what I need to do is make some kind of a jig to create, I guess, a mirror image of all the mounting points for the pushrod suspension, and then transfer that over to the passenger side of the car. And just have a quick look here at the bell crank and how it's mounted in double shear. So you can see there's an upper mount there and then a lower mount underneath. So all these tabs that I've welded to the chassis, when I was doing the driver's side, I actually made the same tabs for the passenger side. So when I do come over to this side, I'll be able to transfer all that over pretty quickly because everything's been duplicated. So I made four of each tab. So if there's two tabs that mount the shock to the chassis, then I've got the other two all ready to go. Same with the bell crank mounts, and same with where the pushrod mounts to the lower control arm as well. So the last thing I was doing before I actually broke my leg was working on the bell crank and the pushrod, getting it all mounted for the pushrod suspension. And before that I actually built this new firewall in the car. So because I moved the engine back, I had to cut the original firewall out and then create a new one. So I haven't actually put the engine back into the car since creating the new firewall, so I'm pretty keen to make sure that everything still fits. It was done using cardboard templates, but you know, cardboard does move around a bit, so pretty keen to put the engine back in and just make sure there's no clearance issues with the new firewall. So moving to the back of the car now. Once the engine's in place, what I want to do is measure up for a custom prop shaft or custom length prop shaft that's going to join the BMW ZF 5-speed to the factory Subaru differential in the back here. Now the main reason I want to do that is because, actually if I get down low, you can see the height of the differential compared to the tunnel. Because I've lifted everything up in the chassis to lower the vehicle, I'm not quite sure the prop shaft is going to clear that tunnel now, so I might have to do a bit of notch there, and that's kind of stopping me finishing some of the tube work in the back. So I'll just grab this pointer stick here. So I'm actually missing two tubes, so one's going to go from down here up to about here, and then same on the other side, so from here back to this corner. So that's two tubes that are missing from the original design. And also you'll probably notice I'm missing my main diagonal in the hoop, so there'll be a diagonal running across, and that'll actually have the harness bar across here. And then I haven't talked about the new seat yet, but I've got this new Racetech seat which is actually rear mounted on the back. Really nice feature for a race seat to have the back of the chair also mounted to the chassis, so it's going to be a very stiff seat. There's going to be very minimal movement. I think it's just a really good design, and that's the reason I actually went with this Racetech seat. Made in New Zealand, which is pretty cool as well, but I've got to say this is very comfortable as well. Like, I can't believe how comfortable the seat is compared to the one that was in here before, which is just actually a passenger seat from my WRX, but yeah, wanted a seat with wraparound protection for the head as well. And so yeah, this has got the back mount, full halo around the head, and it's just a really nice seat. It's just sitting in there at the moment, but it's pretty much in the position I want it. Feels really comfortable. I've also recently got this tilt and pedal box, so you'll see it's got the design where you have the master cylinders mounted underneath your feet. And if you don't know, the exhaust in this car is actually going to come out through this hole, run behind my feet, and then it pops out through this hole here. It will run along here. There'll be a muffler somewhere here, and then it's going to be an exit somewhere here. So yeah, there isn't really enough room for the pedal box where you have the master cylinders behind the pedal box, just because I've got everything's moved back and I don't have a lot of room at the front there, even though I'm not the tallest person in the world. But yeah, it became pretty obvious that I was going to need that type of pedal box with the master cylinders under the feet. Carrying on from there, you see I'm missing my X in the roll cage, so your door bars. I've left them out for now just so it's easy to work inside the car, getting in and out and all that sort of stuff, because I've still got to weld a lot of brackets and mount the seats, mount the pedal box, got to mount my fuel cell. So I've left the door bars out just to make it easy to work on, but the doors themselves are actually only going to come halfway up, so the bottom half will be fixed and only the top half will open. So the muffler will be just sitting under that bottom half. There's nowhere else for the exhaust to go because the car is like so low to the ground. This is the actual ride height, so yeah. So the new seat and the pedal box were purchased recently just because I want to get the cockpit sort of sorted out and I want to get the steering mounted. So you can't really mount your steering wheel or your steering column without your seat and your pedal box, because everything's related to each other. You know, if you're sitting in the seat, you want the steering wheel to be centered, you know, and your pedal box to be all in the right spot, and everything has to work around each other. So I've got the factory BRZ EPAS system that's going to go through. It's just going to be mounted under the dash here, running through steering rack there. So the steering linkages will go up over the turbo. I'm going to punch a hole in the firewall just next to the shock there, and then that'll come through to the standard electric power assisted steering column. I've got the steering wheel too, but it's actually the wrong size. I was sent the wrong size by mistake. It's a long story, I won't go into it, but essentially this one is only 270 millimeters, which I think is way too small for a car of this size. So I've ordered another wheel, which is just a more traditional round shape with a flat bottom. So that'll be 330 millimeters, which I think will be pretty spot on, I think, for this car. I've also got the weld on quick release here, and I've got this nice titanium extension piece. Because I'm sitting so far back in the car, like I said, everything's been moved back because of the firewalls come back. The exhaust is in front of my feet, and you can see the seat is actually going to be mounted kind of where I guess the rear passenger's feet used to be. So having this little extension piece means when you quick release the steering wheel, you have a lot more space between the steering column and the seat, so you can get out of the car a lot easier. And being titanium, it pretty much weighs nothing. So there's a lot of fabrication that still needs to be done, but what I'm actually really looking forward to doing is some of the composite panel work. I haven't really done any composite work before, but I'm looking forward to learning how to do it. So why am I doing composite work? Well, have a look at the front wheel, for example. It's just way too big for the original bodywork. The car is so low and so wide compared to how it was from factory that pretty much everything needs to be recreated. So yeah, you can see that's just part of the work that needs to be done to recreate the lines of the bodywork. The rear isn't as extreme as the front, but it's still, the wheels are still too wide and too low. I've already trimmed a fair bit from the original wheel arch just to get it to that point. I mean, the whole back of the car, I mentioned in previous videos, is going to be made from composite. Going to do a carbon roof, redo the fenders, do a fair bit of trimming around where the air evacuates behind the tyres on the front there. Got to integrate some ducting through the intercooler and the radiator. So that's going to come in through a duct, pass through the coolers and out through the top of the bonnet. So we're going to have to re-sculpt the bonnet to have a big duct in the top. And as I mentioned before, the whole back of the car is basically no longer serving any function because the roll cage now supports all the suspension, and it'll also support the rear wing. So all this steel back here is really, you know, doesn't need to be here. It can be made out of composite. So going to be shaving a fair bit of weight from the car when I convert most of it to composite panel. And then once all the composite work has been done, the plan is to get some corner weights, so get the scales under each wheel, and then look about how I'm going to mount the things like the fuel cell, battery, dry sump oil tank, basically all the things that can be moved around the car. We're going to be using the corner weights to position those in the best spot possible for weight balance. So just coming over to, I'll probably do a separate video on some of these things like the fuel system, but that's actually my fuel cell there. It's kind of like a giant swirl pot. It's 17 litres capacity and it should be good for about 3 laps. Got the electric water pump in here, radiator, intercooler. Up here is the dry sump oil tank, and then we've got the power steering EPAS system that has to go in. So going to be positioning all those things in the best place possible for weight balance in the chassis. Most likely everything is going to be where the passenger used to sit, in this sort of region here. There's going to need to be a proper fully sealed box around things like the fuel cell and the oil tank for safety. So obviously having the fuel tank next to you or the fuel cell sitting next to you, you can't just have it sitting there in the open. The last thing will be the aerodynamic package on the car. Unfortunately, I don't have the budget to pay an expert to come here and scan the car and do CFD and all that sort of thing, but I have a little bit of experience with aerodynamics, just making my own splitters and things in the past. I used linear potentiometers to measure suspension compression under aero loads and had some pretty good results in optimizing what was actually on the car. So going to do the same thing, going to get potentiometer on each corner of the suspension. My friend Dave, who did the FEA on the rear cradle, he is going to be able to help me a little bit with calculating, I guess, things like flat bottom to diffuser angles and things like that. So all that sort of stuff helps. But yeah, that'll be the last part of the puzzle. Might even run the car at the track without aero at first, just to get the mechanical grip to where I want it to be before we start putting aerodynamics into the mix. But anyway, that's a long way down the track, so that brings me to the end of today's video. If you have any questions about what I talked about today, or anything about the car in general, just drop them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Next video is probably going to be another build breakdown on the front pushrod suspension. A really big topic, and I want to make sure I take my time and do it justice, so bear with me on that one. But anyway, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video.